Perhaps it's time to consider additional treatment options. Could electromedicine provide solutions where medications have been limited?
I think a lot of the use of electromagnetism in the past century was quackery, and it was not really anchored in solid science or clinical data. I think what we're seeing in the 21st century is some much more robust data, both in terms of basic and translational science, and especially in terms of clinical results.
Professor Boris Pash is director of the Comprehensive Cancer Center at Wake Forest University Medical Center and associate editor for the Journal of the American Medical Association. Professor Pash and his colleagues have developed a novel treatment that uses very low-intensity radiofrequency electromagnetic fields to target specific types of cancer. The device, known as the TheraBionic device, uses two waves, a carrier wave set at 27.12 MHz and a modulation wave that is specific to the type of cancer being treated.
We initiated this research in 2001, and after a couple of years, we were quite surprised to find that the same modulation frequencies were found over and over in patients with the same type of tumor, irrespective of their gender, their age, and their ethnic status. So it suggested early on by 2003 that tumors might respond to some specific frequencies.
The researchers used biofeedback in order to determine the frequencies that correspond to each type of cancer. Variations in the patient's pulse were measured as they were exposed to a range of different modulation frequencies. The results showed that people responded to specific frequencies depending on the type of cancer. Early studies showed encouraging results in a range of different cancers, including patients with metastatic breast cancer and thyroid cancer. However, the research team are now focused on the treatment of liver cancer, medically called hepatocellular carcinoma.
A large number of tumor types are untreatable or incurable, and novel approaches are sorely needed, in particular for the treatment of hepatocellular carcinoma, which is the most rapidly growing tumor type in the United States. And for such tumors, when we're limited option, it's clearly an area where novel ideas and novel thoughts are needed to try to make a breakthrough in a disease that we otherwise treat very poorly. Most patients that have advanced hepatocellular carcinoma are very sensitive to many drugs because their liver function is impaired. And most chemotherapy drugs or even targeted therapies need a well-functioning liver to be metabolized properly. So this is a major impediment for many therapies. What we have found is that patients, even with impaired liver function, seem to benefit from this novel therapy. So in the practical sense, this is a device that consists of two units. One is the docking station that charges the device like your electronic toothbrush, and that conveys to the device the authorization to be treated. The docking station will have a prescription card that will be containing 100 treatments, and that will be the way the patient will have the authorization to be treated. The docking station itself will be connected at the doctor's office to a server that will connect with the company's central server to make sure the proper program is given to the proper patient with the corresponding tumor, and ensure that everything is working properly. The patient will start the treatment by essentially pressing a button, and as soon as the button is started, the patient will place the mouthpiece in the mouth like that, and will keep the lollipop, as many patients have called it, in the mouth for 1 hour at a time, 3 hours per day. Once the treatment is over, the patient will just place the device back on the docking station, and the device will be ready for next treatment.
An important feature of the TheraBionic device is that it's able to target cancer cells and leave the healthy tissue intact, something that cannot be said, of course, for other types of cancer treatment, such as radiotherapy.
That is correct, and this is what we had observed in our early clinical experience. We have now conducted experiments in the lab that confirm the tumor specificity of these modulation frequencies. In other words, only tumor cells that are exposed to corresponding tumor-specific frequencies seem to be affected in their growth, while there is no impact on normal cells.
What we've seen so far is that we've identified a phenotype, is that we're getting proliferative inhibition, which means cells are not able to divide. So that means that something within the cell genetically is potentially being modified. So in order to investigate that and understand that, which is part of the mechanism of action, what we're doing is we're using techniques that are currently cutting edge and understanding the changes in microRNAs. We're no longer looking at it from the 40,000 foot level. We're looking at it under a microscope now. Our understanding then becomes how the genetic changes in that cell are leading to the phenotype or the proliferative inhibition or the anti-cancer effect that occurs with the TheraBionic device. And so based off our data that we have so far, we've noticed that there are certain genes that are changing, which in turn are indicative of certain pathways. And that in turn will lead us to understand how it goes from the exposure of your entire body, head to toe, to a single cell, in this case, a specific cancer cell, actually having a response which is incredibly beneficial for the patient.
The patients that have been treated so far are patients that have failed standard therapies. And in those patients, we have found that there is a certain degree of efficacy and especially long-term responses, and what is particularly important, without any side effects. First, you treat patients that had no other option. It's called phase 1 of feasibility study. That's what we have done. Then you move to phase 2 to try to gauge the level of efficacy, and we have conducted these type of studies. And in hepatocellular carcinoma, we have conclusive data showing efficacy. What we have not done yet is to compare this type of therapy either with no therapy or with one of the standard therapies for hepatocellular carcinoma, and that would be a phase 3, a randomized phase 3 study.
As we've already seen with AlphaStim, the adoption of the TheraBionic device requires an appreciation of the fact that where electromedicine is concerned, we no longer have a dose response. Traditionally, of course, medicine is used to the idea that a higher dose of the treatment will produce a greater result, both for the desirable effects of the medication and for the adverse effects. However, electromedicine involves the use of frequencies, and the results are not dependent upon a higher intensity. In fact, in many cases, very low-intensity electromagnetic fields produce the best results. The specific absorption rate, or SAR, is often used as a measure of the amount of radiofrequency electromagnetic energy absorbed by the body when a particular device is being used. For example, Apple's iPhone 6 has an SAR of around 0.9 to 1.19 watts per kilogram.
Actually, a very good point. So far, as is published, our SAR levels have ranged from 0.03 all the way up to 1 milliwatt per kilo, and we found that in that range there is no difference in the outcome, which is the anti-proliferative effect, which means that it's potentially it's not limited to the dose, but rather there's something specific about the frequencies that we're using regardless of dose, if you will, or the SAR.
So not only are there a wide range of exposure levels that seem to have an effect on cancer cells, but the exposure levels associated with this effect are also less than 1/1000th of the exposure typically generated by a mobile phone. The concept